Hello, everyone. Greetings and welcome to another Saturday Secrets of Eventide stream. These streams are here for me to talk about some of the far future plans, to kind of give you more insight into my process and the way my brain works when I'm planning out a campaign and a world and an adventure. And today we're going to do just that. So what I want to talk about here today, while we got some time, is I want to chat a bit about what I'm doing with, we got Wolfren's Fate, and that is well known by everyone and is still chugging along, and we've been making very good progress on the playtesting. They're about halfway through part 2 now, and about to enter kind of the last half of this adventure, which frankly should be a bit of a roller coaster. But what I'm trying to plan out right now is what happens after Wolfren's Fate. Because Wolfren's Fate is meant to be an introductory adventure. Its goal is to introduce the players to the world and the setting and kind of some of the central themes that I'm going to be telling in this campaign. Because ultimately, I think my initial goal here is going to be for folks to experience Eventide through these adventures. Because I think ultimately, I can write a whole bunch of setting stuff, and I'm in the process of doing that, and allow other folks to tell their own stories. But I know that here in the very early going, when frankly, there's not a lot of content, because I'm just one person working on this on my spare time, that this is, going to be one of the main vectors. So what I'm trying to do is basically plot out what a campaign might look like. And I've got a lot of ideas for things that might go in different directions. I might canvas folks here today to toss some other ideas into the pyre, and we'll see what comes out the other side. Nothing that I'm saying here is set in stone. All of this stuff is subject to change, but I do have a bunch of thoughts, and a few of them I think are much more likely than others. So, with all that being said, Wolfren's Fate is designed to take the player characters up to about 3rd level. They should be 3rd at the end of the adventure. I think, after part 2, they'll be close. They're 2nd already. After part 2, I think they'll be close to 3rd, but not 3rd. Throughout part 3, I expect that they will hit 3rd. And I guess it is possible that they might even get all the way up to sniffing at 4th level by the time it's all said and done. I actually don't think part 4 is a gigantic piece. I think part 4 is the final vault dungeon, and that's kind of it. It's not a lot of drama. I don't want to hold up the end too much. But regardless, I think they're going to be somewhere in 3rd level is a definite. So what happens after that? What other story beats are there? And frankly, I'm kind of dividing things along 2 axes. One is it a big story or is it a little story? And by big story, I mean, is it something that's going to take several sessions to complete and have multiple different kind of arcs and narrative structures in it? Or is it a small story? Something that's probably 2 adventures, 2 sessions, tops, right? Some setup, some travel, some adventuring, and we're done. So I have some things that I call, minor stories and some things I call major stories. And that's one axis that I'm evaluating these things on. And then there's another axis that is this tied into the central story of the world? Or is it just an adventure that is set in this world? Because ultimately, I don't think that every story I tell should be directly tied to the main story of the world. First of all, it feels obvious. I think it feels kind of forced. It also feels really incoherent after a while that, it's like, does anything else happen here, or is it just about this? And so, I think having other stories that tell other facets of this world that show that it isn't just this main story, it is other stories, is important. So there's that. So here's what I'm thinking. I'm gonna walk through some of the bigger story pieces that I think are floating around. And then I'll walk through some of the minor pieces, and assuming we have time, I'll try and kind of sketch these out in order. I haven't actually done this work. I've just been sketching down adventure ideas, so I don't really know how all these things are going to fit together, but there might be something interesting around here. So, when it's important to know the game state at the end of Wolfren's Fate. I think at the end of Wolfren's Fate, the following things are true. The player characters have freed Wolfren from his slumber. He has woken up and realizes that 300 years has passed. He is devastated to find out that this is true, because what his research was telling him was that the danger to the world was accelerating, and losing 300 years, really not good. He's going to wake up in a bit of a panic. He's not going to like that. So, but that said, he's not going to want to leap out to adventure right away. He's frankly going to be pretty physically frail at the start of this, and he's going to need time to recover and get himself set up. That gives the PCs time to do other things. I actually want the adventure that comes right after Wolfren's Fate to be kind of not related. Just a different adventure. But eventually, Wolfren will be back at his full capacities, and will be there as a bit of a mentor to the PCs. He can be a bit of a quest giver. He can also be a story driver. And I think that's where his role is best suited, is that he trusts the PCs because they freed him. They rescued him, and they're really the only people he knows in this century other than Jaratha. And that whole storyline I'm going to have to suss out. I don't quite know where I'm going to take that, because him and Jaratha were in love, or at least in lust, 300 years ago, and she is now in the end of her years, and he is certainly in the end of his. So they may get back together and have their sunset years together. I think that is an important part of this narrative, but we'll see. I don't necessarily want it to be just like snap, and now they're a couple again. There might be some drama there. I don't know. There's a question here of do we know how Wolfren was sealed away? He did it to himself. During the adventure, at the end of part 1, you get the book. So this is in the PDF that you should have. At the end of part 1, the players find a book in which he has left a letter to them. And that letter basically says, hey, I'm locked deeper in the dungeon. Bring my signet ring to the vault door and come rouse me. I have put myself in a slumber because the food is running out and I'm trapped in here and I don't know how to get out. And I'm leery of using powerful magics because I might bring the whole tower down on top of me. So, that's kind of where it's at, is that Wolfren is trapped and he put himself in this slumber. So let's talk, because I think anything that has to do with Wolfren is considered main plot. And then all the other stuff is kind of subplots. So when we're talking about main plot, I'm seeing at least 2 major story beats that are floating around in here, possibly more. But it wouldn't surprise me if all of the major story pieces involve Wolfren and his tale. But I don't think that necessarily has to be true. I just have to make sure I plan them carefully. And yeah, Wolfren had no intention of being asleep this long, but he just, said it and was like, if I can get out of here, someone will eventually find me and rouse me. He thought that was only going to be months, weeks or months. It ended up being 300 years. All right. So, I think one of the first bigger pieces in this, might be a bigger story, it could actually be a minor story, depending on how it plays out, is a journey to Varnathus. That Wolfren needs to go back to Varnathus to reestablish some connections, and maybe there's some intrigue or drama with the Dawnbringer chapter house there, because it's one of the major ones. And Wolfren is kind of a mythic figure in the Order's history at this point, and now that he's alive, maybe they want to confirm that he's alive, right? That he's not just a charlatan. Or maybe there's some drama or intrigue. Maybe the Gaunts have infiltrated it. But I think, in either case, I think the players, their first real quest with Wolfren is probably, this probably isn't a high-level thing, but it's probably a journey to Varnathus escorting Wolfren there and back. So it's an escort quest. But I do think this gives the players an opportunity to visit Varnathis to kind of see how the massive, connection of trade works, to get a sense of what is to the east, out of the Icescar Valley, all the way out to the Steaming Sea. And I think that's an important plot piece. Would I do it right after Wolfren's Fate? No. It's got to come a little later, maybe when they're 5th level or something, and then it can be kind of a meaty adventure with some good wilderness monsters, right? Because I feel like there are the sweet spot for fun wilderness monsters is around 5, right? You get manticores, you get wyverns, you get all sorts of kind of higher level beasties. You got a lot of good natural animals, bears and wolves and stuff that are still threats that you can kind of throw in larger numbers. I feel like there's just a lot of fun things to do in a wilderness setting. Yeah, with it being an escort quest, yeah, you always have to kind of wait for Wolfren to catch up to you. Or if you stop for a minute, he walks right past you and keeps going. And then gets 10 feet further down the path from you, stops, turns around, and is like, are we going to get going? And then you always leave him behind, right? Yeah, there's definitely some fun stuff there. Yeah, owlbears certainly come into play. Yeah, so I feel like a journey adventure is kind of probably in that area. There's some things that I think come in later. Another big story possibility is Rime Shield. Going up to Rime Shield, this is that community, the Dwarven Mine that's up in the mountains that was abandoned centuries ago when ice serpents overran them and froze a bunch of dwarves inside their caves, buried them there. There is a dwarven settlement called Anvil Stump down at the head of the trail that leads to Rime Shield, and I think having the players go there, possibly on the behest of Wolfren, because there's something there that he wants to learn about, because the dwarves were there a long time, that, they could get there and find out that the dwarves have already pushed into the mines and are trying to keep people out and not make sure anybody knows about it, because whatever's in there, if it gets woken up, is very dangerous. So, I think there's definitely a story to be had with Rime Shield. Hold on here just a second. All right. So I think that's definitely a part of the tale is what's going on in Rime Shield. And I do think that is a major set piece adventure, right? There is a large mine complex. It is a massive kind of dungeon environment. There are monsters, there are dwarves, there's all kinds of fun stuff that can happen there. This is definitely an adventure I want to write, because I think it'll be fun. And I think it's a very nice, meaty, mid-level adventure. Yeah, I mean, that's also possible, too, is that the dwarves could approach the PCs to help rescue some of the dwarves. I do like the thought of the players, because I've been noodling with this adventure idea for a while, that the players are sent to Anvil Stump for a reason, and they get there, and there's clearly enough space for, there's clearly enough buildings and beds and barracks for, 50 dwarves, but there's only, 10, and the dwarves that are there are like, yep, nope, this is all of us, right? Nope, we're all here, I'm the commander, and it's all just a lie, because they've actually already decamped and moved up to Rime Shield itself and are exploring the old ruins and possibly getting into trouble. And the dwarves down at the base realize that there is now trouble, and eventually the facade falls apart and they have to go rescue them. I think there's a story there. I don't know how it would all play out, but I do like it starting out with the dwarves kind of being guarded, because they view that mine as part of their heritage and something that the riches in there are theirs, and they want to keep people out. I think it's a little cliche for dwarves, and I'd want to look for ways to kind of spice it up a bit to make it not just kind of the stereotypical dwarf story. but I do think this is pretty important. Next up, I think there's a story, and this one I think is really important to the Wolfren, the main arc, and this is the ruins of Summerglen. So Summerglen was a like satellite community for Ilsanvenir, the city that became Wormbone. Summerglen was like their resort out in the woods, right? So while Ilsanvenir was more like a city, Summerglen was like pools and saunas and a relaxing retreat. But after Eventide, the elves decided to use Summerglen because it already had a whole bunch of wards around it to keep things out. They wanted it to be kind of, a nice calming retreat, and they didn't want wild, they didn't want a pack of wolves running in. The place already had wards and stuff up around it, and they decided to use Summerglen to kind of experiment and do some investigation into what happened. What was it that just occurred? Or in this case, it was like the next year, during spring. Suffice to say, they started summoning things, they started investigating things, and the more and more they dug, the more and more dangerous it got, and eventually something went catastrophically wrong, and Summerglen fell. And it's been that way ever since. It's been a cursed, haunted place. The monsters inside there are kept inside there, but there are a bunch of, like, outsiders, probably fiends, that are quite powerful, that are just stuck in this ancient elven spa, right? So think of steaming pools and old bits of, gleaming marble, nestled in a verdant chunk of forest. But inside all of this, there are demons wandering around, and some of them had the ability to summon other demons, and as a result, the place is just kind of infested with demons, and I think I'm going to go the demon route. It may be devils, I don't know, one or the other, but I think either provides some interesting opportunities. So obviously this is higher level, because I'm going to want to be able to throw some of the higher level demons or fiends at the party. I do think that this ties directly into the main story, because maybe the elves did find out some things, right? Maybe although the place fell into ruin, maybe some of their research did uncover some of the truth. Investigating that might be critical, but incredibly dangerous. So I like the idea of them like making a camp outside and then having to basically venture inside this place, but not wanting to be in there too long, because the moment the fiends know that you're there, they'll swarm you. So you have to kind of like stealth in and do some things, then stealth back out. That way they don't find you. And maybe, they have to be very careful not to disrupt the ward, because then it'll let these fiends out, and then they'll be all throughout the woods. It's a tricky thing, right? Not higher level, but might be a big story. Something I might explore is the struggle in the Icescar Valley, and in particular Wormbone, between the Nine Spokes and the Upstart League. This could be a major story. I don't think it's a mainline story. I think it's a side story. Do the demons use Summerglen as a spa resort themselves? Yes, probably. Yeah. You got a demon in a pool relaxing. I think that's nice. The pool is very foul now, but the demon is nice and comfortable. So I do think that works. But getting back to the Nine Spokes in the Upstart League. So the Nine Spokes is the kind of secretive organization that runs trade throughout the north and has families in Varnathis and Wormbone and Tusktown, and they control trade in the north and use their power and influence to keep Zankar at bay. The Upstart League is a bunch of smaller noble houses that are new and trying to muscle in, and finding their ambitions blocked at every turn by this mysterious organization that is constantly moving against them. From multiple different directions, because it's hard to tell who's even involved. So there is this kind of conflict set there, and it's possible I might try and explore that. I don't know what form this might take. I haven't. This is a very nascent idea. I mean, it was set up as part of the world lore, but I don't know that I know what form it might take directly. It might take the form of, you know, them doing some sort of warfare. It might take the form of the Upstart League rousing up the working folk of Wormbone to kind of shift the balance of power away from these major merchant and mercantile concerns. That is certainly possible. How the P6 is dragged into this is also interesting, because they may be, depending on where this is put, they may be celebrities locally and are able to be, you know, leveraged by both sides to support their cause. Yeah, a murder mystery. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. That maybe they start assassinating one another. Like there are assassins working in Wormbone, and business is good because they keep getting contracts to kill members from the other group. And maybe it could be something where like the Nine Spokes gets tired of the Upstart League actually making inroads and hires assassins to take out head family members or something. I think that's certainly possible. But who knows? I don't know where this would take, but opening it would definitely be a big story. And then finally, I also have in my big story possibility is Zankar. Is Zankar moving to, through some sort of trickery or duplicity, Zankar trying to move into the area. Like, and this may play into the Nine Spokes and the Upstart League thing. So maybe this is part of the same story, that Zankar uses the strife between the other two. See, this is why I talk these things out. That Zankar inflames the kind of conflict between the Nine Spokes and the Upstart League to destabilize the region to the point where Zankar can start moving in. Because they would like nothing more than to move into this region. Because if they do, they split the North in half. Because then Varnathis will stand alone and Tusktown will stand alone, and they don't have each other to rely upon because they are no longer connected. The Icescar Valley is key. If Zankar can get the Icescar Valley, and really what that means is if Zankar can get Wormbone under its thumb, then that's the game. That's the ball game in the northern part of the continent. Varnathis could probably hold out for a good long while, but it's only a matter of time before Varnathis is too isolated and too reliant upon one method of trade, which is just basically their port trade, which isn't a year-round thing, or is almost not a year-round thing, that it's too much, and Zankar can claim all of the North. So, those are major story beats, I think. Just thinking about those, I don't think any of those happen too soon after Wolfren's fate. Maybe the journey to Varnathis happens relatively soon thereafter. I think the Rhyme Shield story definitely wants to happen in the 7, 8, 9 range, somewhere in there. Summer Glen probably wants to happen in 12, 13 in this high level, and if Zankar is going to do anything, making that high level would be really cool. But it could happen lower, right? The Zankar thing could be a lower level thing, because you're ultimately dealing with humans and soldiers and stuff. But you could make it a higher level thing where the party of high level adventurers has to go and find a way to stop Zankar from taking over Wormbone, and that might be complicated. It might involve even a journey into Zankar, which is something I haven't really thought about, having this adventure go south really at all. I've got a bunch of minor stories I can play with as well. Some of these might fit in here, some of them might not. I don't know. And some of these are probably just, like, oh yeah, this is one of these should be what happens after Wolfren's fate. So first off, I've already been kind of seeding this because I've been kind of thinking about it. And that is a good point, actually. Laura brings up that the Zankar thing could be a slow burning major story piece, where there are bits and pieces of it, and then it comes together, it snaps together, right? That might be interesting, actually. I'll give that some thought. It might start off with 9 spokes in Upstart League, and it might seem like a minor story, but over time, it blows up into, oh, this has been going on this whole time. And in that, this is not really main story, right? It's not the main story of Eventide as a setting, but it is the important story in the north. So it might be that there's 2 parallel, competing story arcs. And then, you know, but both happen kind of intermittently. That might be interesting. I'd have to play around with it and see whether or not I can get all the pieces to fit, but there might be something there. So, talking about minor stories here, I think one thing that I'm already kind of starting to set up, and I may have even mentioned this to one of my groups offhandedly during the playtest, was that Grablin's Lot may need some help, right? So this is one of the other rival groups of adventurers. They're a bunch of newbies. They don't know what they're doing, and unlike the PCs who've gained a level and are getting themselves together, Grablin's Lot is a bunch of kids. They hardly know what end of the sword to point at the monsters, and they are off doing quests. So they didn't do too well in the tower, but I think they get sent on a quest to go treat with the kobolds of the Mudfen. And maybe the story here is that they don't come back, and the players are sent to rescue them. That could be fun. I don't think, looking at my groups, I don't think there's a lot of sympathy for them, because they were competitors, but they're not disliked. Frankly, the Thunder Company folks are disliked. They're viewed as rivals. And in fact, may come back in part 3 of Wolfren's Fate. I'm still trying to decide. But Grablin's Lot, I think I'm just having them exit stage right, go off to the Mudfens and deal with the kobolds. Now, the kobolds aren't inherently evil or anything like that, but they only trade with people from Wormbone occasionally, usually for weird reagents, alchemical reagents, and herbalism things that grow in the mud fens. Mosses and mushrooms and all sorts of stuff like that. And Grablin's Lot gets sent on a quest just to go trade for some stuff, but, you know, it's real easy to offend the kobolds and end up in a cage where they're trying to decide, you know, whether or not to eat you or sacrifice you to the mother, or, try and barter you back for more coin or something, right? You know, suffice to say, I don't think this is a huge adventure. I think this is a journey out to the Mudfens, don't offend the kobolds, and, negotiate with them for the release of these kids. And maybe that involves going and killing some swamp monster, and if you kill the swamp monster, then the kobolds will release the kid. So not a huge adventure. I think it's something that's probably 2 sessions. But I am thinking that might be the story that happens directly after Wolfren's Fate. Is that the players get some downtime, they get some time to rest and recoup, do some crafting, do some skilling, do some work. But then they have to go off and try and save the poor members of Grablin's Lot. So there is that story. I think that's a minor story. I could send them out to the free farms to deal with the weird cults out in the free farms. I do think that's an interesting story, but I'm not convinced that it's a story I need to tell. Because there is this kind of evil cult of Silex. Silex? Fiverex? Festering out there, pretending that they worship the White Mammoth. There is an interesting story there that could be told. I'm not sure that it needs to be told as part of this. But going out there and dealing with them for some reason might be fun. I also think there's definitely room for, like, mystery in the mountains, right? One of the things I tried to set up was that the mountains are weird and mysterious, and there's lots of strange sights. There's cults living out there in some places. There's that weird Cyclops eye in the mountain. I think having a, hey, there's an old ruin, or there's an old settlement or something like that, or there's a monster that dwells up on the mountains and is coming down and preying upon the livestock out at near Red Thistle. I think there's definitely room for a minor adventure that is travel to the mountains and deal with monsters in some way, shape, or form. I don't know what it is, but it feels like something that could be fun and kind of non-related. The players just get hired or take it upon themselves for some reason to go deal with these sorts of threats. Now, obviously, I think there's an entire sub-branch of these, which is minor stories set in Wormbone, because I don't want every story to be, all right, now we leave Wormbone. Because looking at the major possibilities, right, the Journey to Varnathus, we leave Wormbone. Rhymeshield, we leave Wormbone. Summerglen, we leave Wormbone. Now, the Nine Spokes Upstart League stuff would be in Wormbone, at least good chunks of it, so that there is a major story that is at Wormbone. Good. And, you know, there might be some other ways to tie some of these other pieces in there too, but I think the minor stories need to kind of be, some of them should be in Wormbone, because that is a major location, and having more adventuring there is a good deal. So dealing with, for example, the religious strife in the city, right? The cult, the Church of Valanav and the Church of Astromari only kind of get along with one another. They have very different aims because the Church of Valanav is aligned with the Resolute Heart, which is a group of kind of religious fanatics who want to make everyone worship the gods in the old ways. And that doesn't go over very well with most folks. So I could certainly do an expanded story of dealing with, you know, the players go to help Mother Yurla at the Foot of Mercy, and she needs help, but the Resolute Heart is giving her trouble, and, you know, it could just be an adventure that winds between the politics and the machinations of the various religious orders, right? Valanav and his followers are mostly trying to maintain order and control, and Astromari is more focused on helping people. And then you've got the Sylara worshippers who are, you know, fervently opposing the Valanav, but not in a coordinated effort. Not really their way. Now, there's another element of drama here, too, which is the criminal element in the city. I do think this is worth exploring at some point in time, and doing a minor story with this is going to be important because I'm already laying the groundwork for it. The major criminal element in this city operates through the Belching Blackguard. I don't think I'm going to do a traditional kind of Thieves Guild sort of thing. I think what I'm going to do instead is kind of focus on, there are some gangs that are fighting over turf and territory, and they would love for one of them to be the Thieves Guild of Wormbone, but none of them are there yet. I like the fact that the Thieves Guild, that the criminal element is more nascent in Wormbone, whereas in a place like Varnathus, it's old and established, and, you know, everybody knows that it exists. The town guard knows that it exists, but also knows that they can't get rid of it without causing serious problems. But here in Wormbone, it's much less formal. The gangs are kind of fighting for turf, and the PCs can get drawn into the middle of this. Because in part 2, they get this, you know, somebody puts out a hit on them through the Belching Blackguard's kind of criminal job board, and the players might have to infiltrate that, and, you know, it's possible that they're trying to solve a crime, or, you know, recover something that was stolen, and the thief left behind their job card, but they still took the thing. So, you know, they may be on the hunt to get a precious stolen item back. There's definitely a lot of stories there that can be told. I think some of those are pretty fun. And then, like, there's some of this could tie into some of the other stories as well. I could do a minor story about the next workers' election, right? Because the workers' seat on the council goes up for election once a year, and the current person holding it is popular, but maybe, you know, the House Trevere of the noble seat doesn't want her in that seat because, frankly, she's obnoxious in fighting for workers' rights, and they try and run kind of a toady candidate. So this might be a minor story that plays into the major story, and maybe this is actually a feature of the Nine Spokes versus Upstart League, in that both of those are trying to get a person in the seat that is more favorable to them and their interests. So, like, so all things being equal, I've got a lot of story possibilities floating around in here. And if I think about pacing, I think, you know, and how these things might play together, I think what I should probably do is say, okay, so Wolfren's fate goes 1 to 3. The next major story piece is probably the journey to Varnathis, but I don't think it's as major as Wolfren's fate. I think it's a 4 or 5 part adventure, 4 or 5 session adventure, not a... I mean, we just finished up session 11 of Wolfren's fate, right? For both groups, 11 or 12. So it's been going for a while. I think this is more like 5 or 6. You know, the journey to Varnathis, dealing with some drama or secrets in Varnathis and back. It's probably a level of play. So it might be something where, like, the journey to Varnathis is 5th level. Giving me some room between to run some minor story stuff throughout 4th level. And maybe it's 5th and 6th. I don't know. But I think there is a big story piece that is probably multiple levels and is the size of Wolfren's Fate, and that's the Rhyme Shield adventure. I think the Rhyme Shield adventure is probably 7, 8, 9, roughly. Probably the higher level stuff up there, because the monsters can be very powerful. You can deal with subterranean threats. There's a whole ton of cool stuff you can throw at the PCs. The environmental dangers. There's all sorts of stuff. So that could be interesting. So yeah, the Journey to Varnathis would be 5th level. There'd be another interlude. And maybe at 7th level, they get into the Rhyme Shield adventure. And then after that, more interludes. And we look at the Summer Glen thing, and that's a mid to teens level adventure, or low to mid teens level adventure. So like 13th, 14th, something like that. I don't know, maybe. And if the Zankar thing is happening in here as well, maybe part of that happens as soon as, you know, the break after the Journey to Varnathis, and then, escalates at the higher levels, and maybe it occurs before the Summer Glen stuff. Maybe it's after the Summer Glen stuff, the finale for it. And ultimately, I don't know that this is the sort of thing where the characters reach 20th level. That's not as important to me. But I am trying to think of where the through line of the main plot is, which is the players uncover something pretty dastardly. And I think it probably involves Zankar. So there is part of me that thinks the Zankar invasion bid is the conclusion to the Icescar cycle, right? You know, the stories of what happens in the Icescar Valley. And that would be it. Like, after that, I move on to a different area, a different region. Maybe I shift locations and start exploring Bellcrash, or I go down to, Crown Bog. Or maybe that's when I go down to explore the areas in southern Alnir that is, the really old stuff, right? Like, this is the what am I thinking of? This is the plot and the stories from the Edge of Eventide, the original adventure that started this whole campaign, where we go down to Aubenglade and Silver Spear and explore the story I wanted to tell there, because that story was actually really fascinating to me. Because that story deals with kind of the central story of the world well, but from an entirely different angle. That's neither here nor there. I could do an entire Secrets of Eventide just talking about that thing. Maybe I'll do that next time, is I'll just do looking back and look at the original adventure called The Edge of Eventide. So I'm running out of time here today. I'll take a few questions here before we call it good, because I do want to make sure I have plenty of time to get set up for my next stream. Tiger Eyes asks, so you're not looking at this series, looking on this series of level 1 to 20 is not the solution to the world's magic failing, save the world? No, I actually don't think... I'm not sure that this arc is the you save the world, right? I don't know that that is ever the main story I'm trying to tell, at least not until, like, you know, I mean, the 7 truths are still out there. I do think that throughout this, they will learn probably up through 3 or 4, but 5, 6, 7, I'll probably keep a secret for the future. Because there's a lot of things I want to play with here, and I don't know that I necessarily want to solve it all in the first go. Some of these stories probably take more setup, and are frankly pretty big in scope. So I'm gonna have to think about that. I mean, honestly, I don't know. You know, I think the Zankar thing, so, you know, Zankar knows a lot more than they're putting on, right? I mean, that's the scary part, is that Zankar knows, right? And they are profiting off of the changes to the world and are viewing it in such a way that they think they can come out on top. And how that interacts, and how that, I mean, the big revelation there might be that Zankar is involved with all of this in a way. Like, they didn't cause it necessarily. That they're not behind it, but they are benefiting from it. They're in league with what is going on here. In that they view it as a positive change. Whereas there's obviously a lot of people who view it as the worst thing in the world. So, yeah. Yeah, I don't know that they're pushing it forward so much as they are benefiting off of the change. And I think if I'm being honest, because this is the secrets of Eventide, is that there are factions within Zankar that know a lot, that know an awful lot about what is happening, and are actively manipulating events to try and make sure they get the outcome they want. Because things are bad, right? There is something eating away at the world's magic, and profiting off of that is pretty vile. And whether or not that reaches all the way to the throne is going to be the interesting question that I don't know that even I have an answer. Yeah, and how the Gaunts play into this is going to be really interesting as well, because the Gaunts clearly are directly tied to this, and the nature of their tie will become more apparent, probably throughout this storyline, right? Throughout the kind of Ice Scar cycle, the nature of the Gaunts will become more manifest. All right, folks. That's all I have time here for today. I gotta wrap this up so that I can get to the other stream. I want to thank you all for watching. The next stream will be this coming Tuesday. I'm honestly kind of not sure what we're going to talk about this Tuesday. Maybe I'll just do more mapping or something, and we'll just do Q&A or something. I'm not sure. I do want to say, folks, that I appreciate everybody for being patient and hanging in here with me. I know this has gone a little slower than any of us would have liked. I am still waiting on files from my editor to get some things back. And that struggle is really hanging me up. I got something else that I've been cooking on because it's not related, and I'm able to move forward on it because this is all being kind of stuck behind a barrier. And it's really exciting, and I'm not ready to talk about it yet, but I'm very close. So, and all of you who have been supporting me here, even though this isn't Eventide related, I'm going to give it all to you, to all of you for free, as my thanks for sticking in there and hanging out. You're going to like it, but it's very different. It's not anything you will be expecting. I guarantee it. All right, folks, that's all I have here today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your support. You make all of this possible. I want to thank you all for watching, and we will see you next time.